Welcome, traveler of dreams. Tonight's November tales creep in like cold air through a cracked window. Before we get started, remember to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss future horror stories like these. Also, let me know where you are watching from, so go ahead and leave a comment. Let's begin. The drive from Madison to Milwaukee usually takes about an hour and 20 minutes. But on that Thanksgiving night, the deserted interstate stretched endlessly ahead like a dark ribbon glinting under the cold November moon. Since graduating from nursing school in 2008, I've been making this exact drive for over 10 years, always assuring my mom I'd text once I arrived safely. That evening, my stomach was still full of turkey and green bean casserole as I kept the heater blasting and listened to a true crime podcast through the speakers. The host was explaining how some predators often operate in pairs when my headlights caught something stirring near the tree line. At first I figured it was just a deer. Wisconsin's full of them, but it looked smaller, limping oddly, favoring one side as if badly hurt. I pulled over about 30 feet ahead of where I'd seen it, engine still running, because something deep inside told me not to turn the car off. When I cracked the door open, the dome lights spread across the shoulder. That's when I saw it clearly. A medium-sized dog, maybe 40 pounds, brown and white patches, dragging its back left leg. It looked like it had been hit by a car. Not fatally, but enough to need help. The soft whimpers it made triggered every bit of my nurse's instinct. I grabbed the emergency blanket from the back seat, planning to wrap the poor thing and get it to the 24-hour vet clinic near my apartment. The dog stayed about 15 feet away, not running off but not coming closer either, shivering under the freezing Wisconsin air. That's when I heard another car coming up behind me. Not unusual, except this one slowed down and stopped about 20 feet back. Its headlights stayed off, which was strange on such a dark highway, only the amber glow of parking lights faintly visible. I thought maybe they saw my hazards and wanted to check if I needed assistance. It happens often out here. But then both doors opened simultaneously like it was rehearsed, and two people stepped out. In my side mirror, I could only make out their silhouettes before the doors shut. One was taller, broader shouldered, and they both moved with a steady, purposeful stride that sent warning bells through every nerve in my body. "Buster, there you are, buddy," the smaller one called, their voice slicing through the silent night. But something about that tone was off, too polished, like a line delivered from memory. The dog didn't react at all. Didn't look, didn't wag, just stared at me with those wide, pained eyes. The bigger one began making clicking sounds, the kind you'd use to call your pet, except he was walking toward me, not toward the animal. My hand stayed on the door handle, half in and half out of the car, when the smaller one spoke again, freezing me in place. "Ma'am, could you help us grab him? He's skittish around strangers, but you're already out of the car." The dog was between us, but their eyes weren't on it. They were both watching me. Every safety lecture, every self-defense tip my dad ever gave me hit all at once. I yanked my leg inside, slammed the door, and locked it just as the larger man broke into a sprint. He reached my window in seconds, punching it so hard I thought it might shatter, his mouth moving in silent rage through the glass as I screamed. My car was still in park, my hands fumbling for the shifter, when the smaller one circled to the passenger side, jerking the handle and pounding against that window too. Their bodies blocked my mirrors, so I couldn't see behind me to reverse. The dog just stood there the entire time, completely still amid the chaos, and even through my panic that stuck out. Any real injured dog would have run or reacted, but it didn't. I threw the car into drive instead, flooring the gas, tires screeching as I sped forward. In the red glow of my taillights, I saw them sprinting back toward their car, both doors still wide open, their escape plan ready. My speedometer hit 80 before I even noticed, weaving around curves too fast but too terrified to stop. I didn't slow down until I spotted the bright lights of a gas station 3 miles ahead. Grabbing my phone from the cup holder, I called 911, my hands trembling so hard I could barely press the numbers. The operator stayed on the line while I parked right in front of the gas station doors, under the lights and security cameras. I told her my mile marker, described the car. A dark sedan, possibly a Chrysler or Dodge with no front plate I could see. The two individuals, one tall, heavy build wearing a baseball cap, the other shorter, slimmer, both dressed in dark clothes. A state trooper pulled in while I was still on the phone, already nearby, and took my statement right there in the lot. He radioed for another patrol to check the highway, and then looked me dead in the eyes, saying something that made my stomach turn. "You did the right thing driving off." We've had 2 reports this month of the same setup, same stretch of road, fake injured animal near the forest. He asked about the dog's behavior, nodding grimly when I told him how it didn't react to the noise or being called. "Probably trained," he said, explaining how some criminals teach dogs to limp on command and stay perfectly still amid chaos, rewarding them afterward. The idea that someone had twisted an innocent animal into bait made me sick. About 20 minutes later, another officer called in saying they'd found tire tracks where I'd described but no sign of the car or dog. They boosted patrols in that area for weeks, but as far as I know, they never caught them. The officer handed me his card, told me to call if I remembered anything or felt unsafe, and suggested changing my driving routes for a while. I didn't sleep that night or for the next 3, just kept replaying it over and over, how perfectly they'd moved together, how the smaller one's voice had that practiced sympathy. I started researching online, diving into threads from truckers and night drivers all across the Midwest. Same tactics reported in Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, always rural roads, always between 10 at night and 2 in the morning, always women alone. The bait varied, sometimes an injured person waving for help with a partner hiding nearby, sometimes an abandoned baby carrier that turned out empty, even staged wrecks. Most theories pointed to human trafficking setups, isolated highways, no witnesses, no chance for screams to be heard. The next morning my mom called, casually asking if I'd made it home okay like she always did after Thanksgiving dinners. I couldn't tell her the truth, just said yes. Traffic was light, everything fine. But I've told nearly everyone else since, especially women driving solo, because that's what stays with me most. If I hadn't left the engine running, if I'd taken just a few steps closer to that dog, if I'd been slightly more trusting or less cautious, I might have vanished without a trace. My car would have been found on the roadside, hazards blinking, door open, and I'd be another name on a missing person list. My family would spend their lives wondering what went wrong somewhere between Madison and Milwaukee on that freezing Thanksgiving night. A week later, a detective following up explained why they might have chosen that exact stretch. Behind those trees lies a maze of forgotten logging roads, unmapped trails leading deep into forest. No one enters during winter. Perfect terrain for moving vehicles unseen, for hiding, for making people disappear. He also mentioned that holidays are prime time, police busy with DUIs and domestic disputes, leaving slower responses for rural calls. Whoever planned it knew what they were doing. They'd studied patrol gaps, timing, geography, and perfected their trap. The limp had likely been trained into that dog for months, practiced until flawless. Even now, I still take that route when I visit my parents, but only during the day. After dark, I stick to the longer path through town, adds 20 minutes, but I sleep easier. Sometimes I think about that dog, whether it was stolen from a yard, bought from a shady breeder, or raised for this twisted purpose. Maybe those 2 are still out there, setting up on another lonely stretch with their obedient decoy. But what I think about most are the women who stopped before me, the ones who didn't keep their cars running, who let empathy override instinct, the ones whose families are still waiting, still searching, still checking their phones for a message that says, "Made it home safe." When it snows in Aurora, the city softens into silence, and that November evening was no different. I was walking Baxter, my golden retriever mix, through the deserted streets around my apartment, boots crunching through fresh powder as he tugged eagerly on the leash, nose buried in every patch of scent that caught his interest along Brighton Avenue. I'd been living in my second-floor unit for 6 months, ever since finalizing the divorce that made me officially single at 29. The building was one of those refurbished Victorian homes from the 1920s, all creaky floors and rattling radiators, the kind where every neighbor's step carried through the walls. Still, Baxter and I had managed to make it ours. That night began just like all the others. I came home from my warehouse shift around 9, found Baxter doing his desperate dance by the door, and bundled up for our nightly walk. The air was freezing and fat snowflakes drifted down steadily, muting the city's distant hum until Aurora looked like a postcard sealed in glass. We trudged past the dumpsters behind the building, Baxter taking his sweet time while I shivered and urged him along, my breath fogging in the air. Everything looked untouched, like nature had draped a clean white blanket across the neighborhood. Once he was done marking his usual spots, we looped back toward the front entrance, passing the rusted fire escape that clung to the side of the building like old bones. Snow covered every platform and step in smooth, undisturbed layers that must have been accumulating for hours. Then something caught my attention. I looked up at my living room window on the second floor, the one whose curtains I always kept closed. They were parted slightly in the middle, just enough for a sliver of warm yellow light to leak into the darkness. Odd, I thought, but reasoned that maybe the radiator's airflow had shifted the fabric. Baxter bounded up the interior stairwell ahead of me, leaving a trail of wet paw prints on the worn carpet while I dragged myself behind him, my back aching from the shift. As we reached apartment 2B, I heard the TV through the door, only something was off. I distinctly remembered leaving it tuned to ESPN for the Nuggets game, but now I was hearing a monotone weather forecast, a meteorologist droning on about snow systems and cold fronts. I unlocked the door, and Baxter bolted straight to his water bowl while I froze in the doorway, staring at the screen. The local news was playing, showing a reporter standing in a flurry downtown. The remote was exactly where I'd left it on the coffee table. Maybe the channel had switched itself or the game had ended early, I thought. I kicked off my soaked boots, hung up the leash and grabbed the remote, switching back to ESPN, where the fourth quarter was still in progress. My apartment was modest, just a small one-bedroom with a cramped kitchen opening to the living room, but I knew every creak and groan of that space by heart, and something felt wrong. The air was unusually warm, like the heater had been blasting the whole time we were gone, and there was a strange smell hanging in the air like damp wool mixed with old smoke. Baxter had finished drinking and was now sniffing at the coat closet near the door, his tail low and stiff, body tense in that way dogs get when they sense something they don't understand. I tried to pull him away, thinking maybe a mouse had gotten in again, when I heard it, a muffled cough from inside the closet, quick and restrained, like someone trying not to be heard. I froze. Every instinct screamed danger before my brain could catch up. Baxter started to growl, a deep vibrating sound I'd never heard from him before, his fur bristling along his spine as he faced the door. My pulse pounded so loudly that the world around me blurred. I grabbed his collar and backed away toward the bedroom, struggling to remember where I'd left my phone. The closet door was one of those old folding types that never fully closed. Through the gap at the bottom, I saw a shadow. Boots, large ones too big to be mine, snow melting off them and pooling into dark puddles on the floor. My mind went into overdrive, screaming at me to move while noticing absurd details, like how that water would warp the wood. Baxter's growl deepened, and the shape inside shifted slightly, rattling the door on its track. I kept retreating until I hit the kitchen counter and knocked over the ceramic bowl that held my keys, shattering it on the tile. The sound exploded through the silence, and immediately the closet moved quick, deliberate motion. Without thinking, I yanked Baxter into my bedroom, slammed the door, and hit the tiny push-button lock, knowing it wouldn't hold against real force. Hands trembling, I fumbled my phone from my pocket, nearly dropping it twice before managing to dial 911. The dispatcher answered as I pressed my ear to the door. I could hear footsteps, heavy ones, moving through my apartment, no longer trying to hide. Drawers opening, furniture shifting. The dispatcher's calm voice asked for my address, which I whispered twice, barely coherent. She told me officers were on their way and to stay put. But all I could hear was the metallic slide of my kitchen drawers, the ones that held my knives. The footsteps moved toward the hallway that led to my room, slow and steady, followed by a raspy breathing sound that wasn't mine. I grabbed the old softball bat I kept by the bed and stood between the door and Baxter, listening, trying to steady my breath. The dispatcher was still talking, but her words were just noise. I whispered, "He's getting closer." The steps paused right outside the door. The silence that followed felt endless. Then the doorknob rattled once, testing the lock, and after that came a low, gravelly laugh. Not angry, amused, like this was entertainment. My blood went cold. I heard him moving away, back down the hall. Then came sounds of rummaging, the couch cushions shifting, papers rustling, drawers sliding open. He was going through my things. Not stealing yet, just exploring. The dispatcher said police were 3 minutes out. 3 minutes can stretch into eternity when there's only a flimsy door between you and a stranger who's broken into your home. Through the window, I saw the snow still falling, the fire escape outside blanketed in white. Except now, I understood. Those pristine layers I'd admired earlier weren't untouched. He'd brushed them smooth after climbing up, covering his tracks. He had planned this, waited, watched. Suddenly sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The noises inside stopped. I heard running, boots pounding across the floor, and the front door slamming open so hard it hit the wall. I stayed frozen, gripping the bat, Baxter pressed tight against my legs. When the sirens blared right outside, I finally unlocked the bedroom door. My apartment looked wrecked. Drawers open, cushions tossed, papers scattered like confetti. The closet door hung ajar, my coat still swaying where he'd pushed through them. Wet footprints trailed from the window to the closet, through the living room, and out the front door, which now stood wide open. 2 officers arrived first, both young and visibly uneasy, followed by an older detective who surveyed the mess and called for the crime scene team. They found where he'd forced the living room window. The frame splintered, the lock busted clean through. The detective, a calm woman named Harper, told me there'd been a string of similar break-ins nearby, always during snowstorms when tracks vanished fast, always second-floor units with fire escapes. What made mine different, she said, was timing. I'd come home too soon. The others had returned hours later to find their homes ransacked. They dusted for prints, photographed the boot marks before they melted, and asked me to check if anything was missing. Nothing was. My laptop, TV, even the cash on my dresser. That somehow made it worse. He hadn't come to steal, he'd come to be inside my world. Then Harper noticed something I hadn't. A half-eaten sandwich on the counter, made with my bread, my turkey, my mustard. Next to it sat an open beer from my fridge, condensation still beating down the side. The realization hit hard. He'd made himself comfortable, sat in my living room, eaten my food, drank my beer, probably watched my TV while I walked Baxter in the snow. Harper said the same detail had appeared in other cases. The intruder always helped himself to food, always left a half-eaten meal behind, as if marking territory. Baxter hadn't left my side the whole time, following me closely, his instincts sharper than mine had been. They caught him 5 days later, just 3 blocks away, attempting another break-in during another storm. A new homeowner security camera caught him climbing the fire escape. His name was Martin Keller, 43, living out of his car after being evicted 6 months earlier. Harper called to tell me they found stolen items from every scene in his trunk, along with a notebook listing addresses, schedules, and personal notes about each victim. My page read, "To be Brighton, single male, dog, walks 9:30 p.m., works nights. He'd been watching us, studying, waiting for the perfect night. He was sentenced to 18 months, eligible for parole in 9. I moved out the following month, found a ground floor place with stronger locks and no fire escape. Baxter and I still take our nightly walks, though. Now I double-check every latch before bed. And every time the snow falls, every time I notice a curtain slightly shifted or a cushion moved, I remember that soft cough from the closet and go room to room, checking every door, every window, every dark corner before I can breathe easy again. The days following Halloween always left our neighborhood feeling oddly hollow, as if the entire block were coming down from a sugar rush. That Monday in 2018 was no exception. I just managed to get my daughter Lila into bed around 8:30, which felt like a small miracle since I'd foolishly let her indulge in too much leftover candy after dinner. Being 33 with a 6-year-old meant my nights followed the same routine: clean up the kitchen, pack lunches, and if luck allowed, unwind with about 45 minutes of whatever series I was hooked on before dozing off on the couch. We lived in a modest 1-story home just outside of Carson Ridge. Nothing spectacular, but the schools were good, and the backyard was large enough for Lila to play. The divorce had been finalized earlier that year, and those first months alone with her had been harder than I'd expected. But by November, we'd found a rhythm that worked. Around 9:30, just as I was folding the last of Lila's school uniforms, the doorbell rang. No one ever came by that late on a Monday, especially in early November when the sun disappeared before dinner and the air turned sharp. Peering through the peephole, I saw 2 people in dark hoodies standing on my porch. Judging by their size, they were likely teenagers, though their faces were hidden under their hoods. They whispered and giggled to each other, the kind of nervous laughter that always came before a prank. I assumed it was some lingering trick-or-treating dare or a lost bet. Without opening the door, I flicked the porch light twice, my silent signal for not interested, and watched from the side window as they glanced at each other, laughed harder, and jogged down the driveway into the dark street. I went back to the laundry, but something about it lingered in my head. Maybe it was how they'd stood too stiff, like actors trying to seem casual. The taller one kept his head low the entire time, and the shorter one's laugh had an odd, almost mechanical rhythm, repeating at steady intervals. I told myself it was nothing. After 5 years teaching 3rd grade, I'd seen kids do far stranger things for attention. I made chamomile tea, double-checked the front door lock, and settled in the living room with my laptop to finish lesson plans for my tutoring students. About 10 minutes later, I heard it, a faint, deliberate tapping on glass. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the back of the house, from the sliding glass door leading to the deck. Every instinct screamed at me to move, but my body wouldn't respond. The tapping continued, patient, steady. I imagined someone just beyond the glass, hand raised, waiting. The motion light back there had been broken since September. I'd been meaning to fix it, so whoever stood there did so in total darkness. Gripping my phone, I crept toward the kitchen, staying crouched behind the island and out of view. Through the glass, I could barely make out a shadow. Tall, unmoving, one arm lifted as if to knock again. Taller than either kid I'd seen earlier, though maybe it was just the angle, or maybe one was standing on the patio chair. I opened my phone to dial 911, but hesitated. What could I even report? Someone knocked, and now they're outside. The tapping started again, lower this time, like they'd crouched down. Then came the sound of the door handle being tested. Slowly, then more forcefully. The faint rattle sent chills down my spine. My phone screen illuminated my face, and I swear the silhouette shifted like it noticed. The figure slid sideways along the glass until it vanished. For several seconds, the only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator and my pulse echoing in my ears. Then came a scraping noise from the side of the house, metal on wood, and I realized with sick certainty they were trying the windows. The scraping moved from the guest room to the bathroom, closer to Lila's room. That broke me from my paralysis. I pressed call. The dispatcher answered quickly, and I whispered that someone was trying to break in, gave my address, and mentioned my daughter was asleep. She told me police were on their way, about 5 minutes out, and to stay away from doors and windows. But I was already moving toward Lila's room when I heard it. Laughter. That same mechanical giggling from earlier, joined now by a deeper adult voice muttering something I couldn't make out. Through the curtain, I saw 2 figures' shadows. One was tugging at the window screen, peeling the corner from the frame. I rushed in, scooped Lila up blanket and all, and carried her into my bedroom closet on the opposite side of the house. She stirred, mumbling about a bad dream, and I whispered that we were playing a hiding game, that she had to stay super quiet, like when we played hide and seek. She nodded sleepily and nestled against me. The dispatcher kept talking, but my focus shattered when I heard something at the front door. A faint metallic scraping, deliberate and slow, working at the lock. Then everything went still. Even the dispatcher seemed to sense it. Her voice softened. "Officers are 2 minutes away. Stay where you are." Liz's breathing was calm against my shoulder, while I sat frozen among my winter coats and old shoes. Then came the sound that still makes my skin crawl, footsteps above us, slow, deliberate steps moving across the roof, stopping right where the attic hatch was in the hallway. The pull-down panel never locked from the inside. I heard the creak of shifting wood, and the dispatcher whispered that the patrol cars were turning onto my street. Seconds later, distant sirens pierced the silence. The footsteps changed pace. Faster now, scrambling toward the back of the house, heavy and desperate. A loud thud followed, like someone jumping down, and then nothing. The dispatcher told me to stay put until officers cleared the property. I held Lila close, feeling her heartbeat steady against mine. When the police finally gave the all clear, I carried her back to bed. She slept soundly, blissfully unaware of how close we'd been to something horrific. Outside, officers found footprints in the flower bed below her window. The screen was slashed with a box cutter, and the front door's lock bore scratches from failed picking attempts. But what truly haunts me came the next morning. A detective returned asking to see footage from my security camera, a cheap wireless one my ex had installed the year before. I'd forgotten it even existed. We pulled up the app, rewound to the night before, and the detective's expression darkened immediately. The shorter figure wore a rubber Halloween mask, an old man's face with gray hair, but the taller one that was no teenager. He was a man, likely in his 40s, wearing a plastic mask meant to resemble a young boy's face. The footage showed him pulling a roll of duct tape from his pocket as the other rang the doorbell. The detective explained they'd been tracking similar incidents around Carson Ridge all week, single mothers targeted the same way. The decoy would draw attention at the front door while the older man searched for another way inside. They caught both of them 2 days later in Brookvale attempting the same thing. The man was a registered sex offender from Louisiana, violating parole, and his partner was his 19-year-old nephew. In their van, police found duct tape, zip ties, rope, and a notebook filled with addresses and observations of women and children, mine among them. Notes detailed what time I turned off lights, when I left for work, and even that Lila attended Valley Creek Elementary. They'd been watching us for at least 2 weeks. I testified at the trial, and the man received 25 years. We moved states the following summer, but the fear never fully left. To this day, if someone knocks after dark, even when I'm expecting them, I check every lock and window twice before going to sleep.